Okay, it's good to be here again after 6 months. Good to see everybody. Everybody's getting older. Jayo Radha Madhava Kunya Vihate Jayo Radha Madhava Kunya Vihate Gopi Nadabalapa Yadvadha Re Gopi Nadabalapa Yadvadha Re Yasodanandana Rajajananana Yasodanandana Rajajananana Yamuna Tera Vanachanti Yamuna Nera Vanachanti Jayarano Madhava Kunya Vihate Jaya Radha Madhava Kunya Vihate Pidana Paladova Hinivadu Hade Pidana Paladova Hinivadu Hade Yasodananda Raja Janaranjana Yasodananda Raja Janaranjana Yamunate Ramanacha Nimona Tera Manachare Jayurano Madhava Kunya Vihare Jaya Radha Madhava Kunya Vihare Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Parvatakacharya, also Teta Satashi Shimad, His Divine Grace, Abhaya Charananda Bhaktivedanta Goswami, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON Founder Acharya, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Anantakoti Vaishnav Vrinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Friends, say Kaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda. Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasati Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopi Gopinath Saya Mukunda Radhakunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Vrindavanam Ki Jai. Vituranam Ki Jai. Jagannath Swami Ki Jai. Yamunamai Ki Jai. Srimati Lasi Devi Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Gaur Premananda Hari. All glory is to the assembled devotees. All glory is the assembled devotees. All glory is the assembled devotees. All glory is to Shri Guru and Gauranga, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. So, we are reading today from Srimad Bhagavatam, 3rd canto, 10th chapter, text 15. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Ajas tu mata sargo guna vaishamyam atmana dvitiyas tu ahamo yatra dravya jnana kriyodeha Ajastu mahata sargo guna vaishamya atmada dvitiyas twahamo yatra dravya jnana kriyodeha Ajastu mahata sargo guna vaishamyam atmana dutiyas twahamo yatra dravya jnana kriyodeha Adja, the first, to Mahata, of the total emanation from the Lord. Sarga, creation. Guna Vaishamyam, interaction of the material modes. Atmana, of the Supreme. Dvitiya, the second. To, but. Ahamba, false ego. Yatra, wherein. Dravya, material ingredients. Jnana, material knowledge. Kriya Udaya, awakening of activities work. Translation: of the 9 creations, the first one is the creation of the Mahat Tattva, or the sum total of the material ingredients, wherein the modes interact due to the presence of the Supreme Lord. In the second, the false ego is generated, in which the material ingredients, material knowledge, and material activities arise. So we can repeat please repeat, of the 9 creations.
Of the 9 creations.
The first one is the creation of the Mahatattva, or the sum total of the material ingredients, wherein the modes interact due to the presence of the Supreme Lord. In the second, the false ego is generated, in which the material ingredients, material knowledge, and material activities arise. So, purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. The first emanation from the Supreme Lord for material creation is called the Mahatattva. The interaction of the material modes is the cause of false identification, or the sense that a living being is made of material elements. This false ego is the cause of identifying the body and mind with the soul proper. I'm going to explain in a few minutes why it's not the ultimate cause. It's the cause, but it's a secondary cause. Material resources and the capacity of knowledge to work are all generated in the second term of creation, after the Mahatattva. Jnana indicates the senses, which are sources of knowledge and their controlling deities. Work entails the working organs and their control. Oh, okay. Hopefully my neck can bear the weight of this scarf. That's a joke. It's a nice garland. Work entails the working organs and their controlling deities. All these are generated in the second creation. Okay, back to the verse. Ajastu mahata sargugunak vaisham yatmana dvitiyas tvahamo yatra dravya jnana kriyo deyaha. So Om Gana Timiranda Shah Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yeda Tasmai Shigurave Namaha. So there's actually 2 of the creations being described here. The first one is pretty easy. The second one, I'm going to get into a little controversial subject matter with, if that's all right. Are we allowed to be controversial here? No. Okay. I'll be conservative. Anyway, so I won't. So the first one's really easy to describe. Before the creation, when the Mahavishnu was resting, of course he's always resting, there was what we call the pradhan, or the unmanifest state of the modes of material nature. In other words, it wasn't manifest, but then to become manifest, as being described here, the modes interact due to the presence of the Supreme Lord. Mahavishnu glances at this pradhan, and it becomes the Mahatattva, and this glance, excuse me, this life in the body. This glance is known as Shambhu, or Lord Shiva, because the Mahavishnu and Krishna in general, of course Krishna is the source of all the various incarnations or expansions. Ete Changsa Kalakpumsa, Krishna's too. Someone's phone. Anyway, Krishna's tu Bhagavan Swayam. So the Mahavishnu and all the different Vishnu Tattva expansions of Krishna never come in contact with the material energy. That's interesting. So only through Saikshita, which is the glance of the Mahavishnu, are the living entities implanted. Now, where were the living entities before? They were within the body of the Mahavishnu. However, and this is what we're going to address in a second, however, that is not the source of the living entities. We find often that there's this discussion going on in ISKCON, now we get to the controversial part, as to where the soul came from. So some people say the soul came from the Mahavishnu. Some people, because now we're going to talk about false ego, which is the second part of the creation here. Some people say that the soul came from something called the Tatashta. Some people say the soul came from New Govardhana. That's just a joke. And some people, including Prabhupada and Bhaktivinoda Thakur and the Acharyas, say that the soul came from at least some knowledge of Krishna. You understand? So you have this controversy going on. So I'm going to make some references to Prabhupada's statements and also Bhagavad Gita and other different statements here that indicate that the soul and the false ego come because of our own endeavor, our own conscious choice. Now, you'll see here in the verse we just read, let me go back to the verse here, hold on a second, that, let's see, in the purport, yes, it says, this false ego is the cause, all right, the interaction, the material modes here, this is what I want to refer to, is the cause of false identification. Yes, that's a secondary cause. The cause of the false identification with this material world is our desire, Krishna Bhadhirmukha, to turn our heads or our faces away from Krishna. So Prabhupada one time was asked about the material world, and he said, actually, we cause the material world. Now that's very interesting. What does it mean, we cause? We're the cause of the creation of the material world. Prabhupada gave the example in the same way that a prison house, ultimately, the ultimate cause of a prison are the prisoners, not the government. Because if there are no criminals, there would be no cause for creating a prison, right? You wouldn't need it. So ultimately, it's our fault we're here. Those who say that it is not our fault we are here, we were born conditioned, or the soul was born, which goes against the Bhagavad Gita, you know, the jayate mriyate va kadachan, layam bhutva bhavita vana bhuyaha, ajo nitya shashvato yam purana, nahanyate hanyamane sharire, Bhagavad Gita, simple second chapter. For the soul there's no birth nor death, nor having once been does he ever cease to be, is unborn, primeval. What does primeval mean? That means he never came to an existence, and he's not slain when the body is slain. I mean, obviously that's Bhagavad Gita, basic philosophy of Krishna consciousness. So basically, the soul is ever existing, but the soul is not by nature material. The soul doesn't come in contact with material nature in the same way that Krishna doesn't come in contact with material nature. We think we're in contact with material nature, just like one who is playing a video game is thinking that they're part of that video game, part of that virtual reality. You become engrossed in that. For example, I mean, I have this experience one time that I wanted to see what it was like to live in a virtual world. Isn't it? I was thinking, this world's miserable. Because Krishna says that in Gita, so maybe I should live in a virtual world. So there was this one virtual world that exists I'm not going to give you the name because I don't want any of you going into it. And there's 10 million people living in it at any one time. So I decided, let me go in there and see what it's like, see if there's a Hare Krishna temple there. So I got my incarnation, reincarnation, incarnation, into this virtual world. And I was looking around. I did a search. In the virtual world, you can do a search. Is there a Hare Krishna? I found, there's a Hare Krishna temple there. And I went to the Hare Krishna temple because you could fly in the virtual world. It's actually even better than this world. No death, disease, old age. They just unplug you. But anyway, but this is really where we are. I mean, this is basically, anyway, this is controversial. We're like in a simulation here. It exists, but not as we perceive it. We don't say the material world is illusion. We are an illusion and perceiving the material world as something different from what it is. That's what, like, you see a rope as a snake or a snake as a rope. Doesn't mean it doesn't exist. You're just seeing it in the wrong way, in the illusory way. So anyway, just to continue with that story, which is one of my favorite stories, went into this virtual world and flew to the temple, the Hare Krishna temple, and I found out that dhotis were for sale with virtual dollars. And so I went there and I ran into one of my disciples there. Normally, right, some of you may have met him. I don't think you ever met him. He's a very short chap. You met Gopal? You met him in Mayapur. And so there he was, tall, handsome. He had reincarnated, taken a different body. He says, "That you, Gopal?" He said, "Yes, Guru Maharaj, please to my humble obeisances, all those are problem." So, I mean, that's really our situation. Okay, so what I'm going to do after speaking about simulation, I'm going to back that up with some verses that I wrote down that actually I've been saving for a long time and I'm hoping to use sometime when I got the opportunity. Because these verses and Prabhupada's statements settle this whole controversy. And actually, if we want to establish tattva, the ontology of things, just like this word mahatattva is used, ontology means the nature of things, the nature of the soul, then we refer, our primary source in ISKCON is the Srimad Bhagavatam, right? And the primary understanding of the Srimad Bhagavatam is given to us by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. So it's not, for me, it's not a controversial topic. It's very, very clear. So, some people, okay, let me say one thing. Some people say that many of the things that Prabhupada said were said as what? Preaching strategies? You've heard this before? But Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada, never changed any aspect of the philosophy to increase the preaching. In fact, Prabhupada was so bold that he risked offending people in different circumstances. Because, why? Because he presented the philosophy as it was. And Prabhupada wasn't interested in political correctness like we are nowadays. Because now I have to be very worried about political correctness, saying the right thing, using the right words, but Prabhupada wasn't. Prabhupada was not a politician. Prabhupada presented things as they are. So anyway, so apart from that, I am going to make some references from the Srimad Bhagavatam and from Prabhupada's statements that back up or verify what I've been saying. First reference is from the 11th canto, 2nd chapter, text 37, famous verse of the Srimad Bhagavatam. And I think some of you know this verse. Mayam Dvitiya Anibesha Ta Shat. Ishada Petasha Vipariyo Smriti Tanmayato Buddha Abhavet Tam. Bhaktyaya Kaye Sham Guru Deva Tatma. So the translation is, fear arises when a living entity misidentifies himself as the material body because of absorption in the external illusory energy of the Lord. When the living entity, excuse me, thus turns away from the Supreme Lord, he also forgets his own constitutional position as a servant of the Lord. That's the false ego, I and mine. This bewildering, fearful condition is affected by the potency for illusion called Maya. Therefore, an intelligent person should engage unflinchingly in the unalloyed devotional service of the Lord under the guidance of a bona fide spiritual master, whom he should accept as his worshipable deity and his very life and soul. Okay, very clear. Another famous verse that I remember from the Bhagavad Gita is 3:27 in the Gita. Prakriti kriyamanani gunai karmani sarvasat ahankara vimudatma kartaham iti manyate. What does that verse say? That the bewildered spirit soul, under the influence of the three material modes of nature, his ahankara again, bewildered, vimudatma. He thinks himself the doer of activities, whereas in reality he's not doing those activities. Elsewhere in the Bhagavad Gita, and I don't remember the reference, which verse it is in the Bhagavad Gita, which purport verse, that the soul, in spite of the body sitting up, lying down, doing this and doing that, he understands he's not doing anything. So in other words, the soul is basically controlling the body. Again, the soul is not the body, but the soul is controlling the body, and he understands it's not him acting. So, another verse to prove this point. Let me see, this verse, I got so many verses here. Is Madhya Lila, 22nd verse and 22nd chapter in Madhya Lila, another famous verse. Text 107. Nitya Siddha Krishna Prem Saja Kabunai Shavanadi Shuddhachite Kareye Udai, which translates as eternal love, eternally established. Krishna Prema is eternally part of the soul. It's not to be gained at any time, but it's awakened, Kareye Udai. It's awakened by the process of hearing and chanting. Pretty clear, isn't it? So in other words, we're responsible for the false ego. We're responsible for us being here in the material world. Krishna is not responsible, although in one sense he is the cause of the material world. In another sense, we are more the cause than Krishna, because we caused Krishna to create the material world. Okay. So, our main shastra is the Srimad Bhagavatam, as I explained before, which is our main source of our Siddhanta. And in the fourth canto, chapter 28, text 53, there's 3 verses which are very, very indicative of and informative of how the soul came into the material world. So this is, let me read these verses. The Brahmana continued, "My dear friend, even though you cannot immediately recognize me," that of course is Krishna speaking, the super soul, "can't you remember that in the past you had a very intimate friend? Unfortunately, you gave up my company and accepted a position as enjoyer of this material world." Next text, 54. "My dear friend, both you and I are exactly like 2 swans. We live together in the same heart, which is just like the Manasa lake. Although we have been living together for many thousands of years, we are still far away from our original home. And finally, text 55. My dear friend, you are now my very same friend. Since you left me, you have become more and more materialistic. And not seeing me, you have been traveling in different worlds throughout this material world, which was created by some woman. Don't get offended, ladies. That's reference to Durga. Like Lord Shiva, as I mentioned before, is Shambhu. He is the glance of the Mahavishnu. He consorts with Durga, and Durga is the mother of all of our bodies. And Lord Shiva, in one sense, is the person who implanted us in the material world. Okay. So, more proof from Srila Prabhupada. Okay. Let's see, we got a little time. So this is from a lecture that Srila Prabhupada gave, where he very explicitly tells us that the soul came from the spiritual world previously. Okay, you got it? So this is from a purport and a class Prabhupada gave. Purport. The question, the verse is, anyway, Srimad Bhagavatam 291, and it's a lecture given in Tokyo on April 20th, 1972. So in the purport it states, the question of Maharaj Parikshit is perfectly answered as to how a living entity began his material life, although he is apart from the material body and mind. So Prabhupada said, it's a very important question. Parikshit Maharaj inquired, so many people inquired, so how the living entity was with Krishna? He became fallen in the material world. Is not done? This question is raised. So this question is answered here. How the living entity was with Krishna, became fallen down in contact with the material qualities. So, Prabhupada gives a general answer at first, and then he actually clarifies it. His general answer is, it is simply the influence of the material energy, nothing. Actually, and this is an interesting statement, actually, he is not fallen. Think about that for a second. Actually, he is not fallen. None of you are fallen. But so why are you conditioned souls if you're not fallen? So, because we are thinking that we're part of this material energy, but actually we are not. And we are actually with Krishna, but we don't perceive Krishna. Another example is given here. Prabhupada answers this. Just like the moon is covered with a scattered cloud, a passing cloud you have seen. Everyone has experienced. The cloud passes and it appears that the moon is moving. Have you seen this? And the devotees say yes. Prabhupada says, actually the moon is not moving. It is maya or illusion. It appears that the moon is moving. But similarly, the living entity, because he is a spiritual spark of the Supreme, it is not fallen. It is not fallen. Prabhupada repeats that twice. But he is thinking, I am fallen, I am material. This is the reason. He is thinking, I am this body. Actually, the body has no connection with me. And Prabhupada talks about the connection. I'm going to skip over a little bit. The moon is far away from the cloud and has nothing to do with the cloud, but it appears that the moon is moving. So there's quite a lot here. So I'm just going to skip over some of it. It is the maneuver or handling of the illusory energy of Krishna. This illusory energy develops when we forget Krishna. That is all it is. This illusory identification of me with the body, ahankara, which is the second creation being described here in the verse, with the body, is simply due to forgetfulness. We wanted to forget, we wanted to give up Krishna, we wanted to enjoy this material world. Therefore, Krishna is giving us. Pretty explicit, isn't it? I think there's no doubt. If anyone says this is a controversy, I don't know why they say it's a controversy. And I'm sure some of you can have questions about this. Challenging question at the end. Anyways, just like when you play some part in a drama, if you feel that I am king, then you can talk very nicely. And if you feel, and Prabhupada gave the name of one of his disciples, Kurandar, then you cannot play nicely. In other words, if you're an actor, and if you think that you are your normal identity, you can't do a good job while you're acting, Prabhupada is saying. Actually, when I was in the university, I studied something called method acting. Anyone's heard of that before? I think Stanislavski method acting, where when you're acting a play, you have to get yourself so much into the role, you forget who you are in the real world, or so-called real world. So, feeling must be there. If you're playing the part of a king, then you must have the same courage and believe I'm a king. You have to forget who you are. So the Prabhupada goes over this again. So because we wanted to play the part of Krishna, the enjoyer, Krishna is giving us a chance. Do you feel like I am a king? Of course, that's Bhagavad Gita. Ishwaroham aham bhogi siddhoham balavan sukhi. All of us are thinking in this world, I'm perfect, I'm powerful, I'm happy, right? That's in the chapter Divine and Demoniac Natures in the Gita. I am Krishna, I am God, this Prabhupada. Of course, everyone laughs. All these rascals who were feeling like that, I am Master, I am King, I am Krishna, I am God, they're simply in that feeling only, that's all. And that feeling is created by Krishna, okay? So Krishna has created that feeling indirectly, the false ego, because of our desire. Yeyatam mam prapajante tam sataiva bhajami hamama vartmana vartante manushapartha sarvasha. Krishna is reciprocating with us according to our desire. In the Bhagavad Gita, he also says, Samoham sarvabhuteshu name dveshos dinapriya. No one is Krishna's favorite. No one is specially loved by Krishna. No one is hated by Krishna. But if one surrenders to Krishna, Krishna reciprocates accordingly. And Krishna says more. This is really a nice purport, a nice class that Prabhupada gave. Every class is nice, Prabhupada gave. And this feeling is great. All right, you want to play the part of a king? I shall train you in such a way. So Prabhupada said, Krishna becomes the director, dramatic director, and creates that feeling. So his direction, Prabhupada said, is nothing, but this is how we feel. And then Prabhupada gives the example then with his youth. I'm not going to go over this whole thing. He played the part of a Dvaitacharya in a play, and he was so good at playing this part in his Dvaitacharya in the play, everybody was crying when they saw him. But they took a whole year to get trained up to play that. So let me skip here. Probably gives many more statements here. Similarly, here's the Prabhupada statement. We have created this material world in activities. Some people are saying, identifying, I'm the manager, I'm the factory owner, I'm this, I'm that. We've got these politics, we have to defeat our competitors. All these things are created exactly like that. Swapna drashtur ivanjasa. Just like a man is creating his particular situation simply by a dream. So the answer is, when someone asks you that, when one has become in contact with his material nature, Prabhupada says, our answer is that he has not come in contact. He is thinking by the influence of the external energy, just like the same example a man is dreaming. Prabhupada repeats himself here. Actually, he has no contact with that. Similarly, actually, we are not fallen. We cannot be fallen. But we have created a situation, in other words, that we think that we've become fallen. Try to understand this point. It is a very important point. We have simply created a situation. We have not created a situation. Prabhupada appears to say something different. Krishna has given us a situation. So our desire is created, but in essence, ontologically, Krishna has created the material world. Because we wanted to imitate Krishna, so Krishna has given an opportunity. That is, all right, imitate. You want to be imitation king. Prabhupada says the same thing. Do like this. People will applaud. Oh, it is very nice. Okay, and Prabhupada says the same thing of playing the parts. All right. So just a little bit more. So this situation, our contact with matter is just like a dream. Actually, we are not fallen. Therefore, because we are not fallen, any moment we can revive our Krishna consciousness. As soon as we understand I have nothing to do with, I'm simply Krishna's servant, eternal servant, that's all, immediately he becomes liberated. Exactly like that. When the fearful dreaming becomes too much, intolerable, we break the dream. We break the dream. Otherwise, it becomes intolerable. Similarly, we can break this material connection at any moment as soon as we come to the point of Krishna consciousness. Oh, Krishna is my eternal master. I am his servant, that's all. This is the way. Actually, again, Prabhupada repeats, we are not fallen. There cannot be any fallen. Same example. Actually, there is no tiger, it is dreaming. Similarly, our fallen condition is also dreaming. We are not fallen. We can simply give up that illusory connection at any moment, Prabhupada says. At any moment, Prabhupada repeats. So if you study all these verses very nicely, you get all this knowledge quickly. So those are the quotes from Srila Prabhupada. I have so many more quotes from Srila Prabhupada. So anyway, we can take a question or two now about the living entity situation and how Krishna in one sense created the false ego and how in another sense we created it by our desires. So, questions? Yes?
It's television here.
Oh, earlier I mentioned...
Waiting on technology. Sorry.
Yeah, technology.
Earlier you mentioned, Maharaj, the soul is controlling the body. But I was thinking that if the body's doing all this dumb stuff, is the soul's maybe animating in the sense that it's the life force.
Yeah.
But it's not really controlling in the sense of, I want to do all this ridiculous stuff.
Not directly. So of course, as we read previously in this particular chapter, there are eightfold material elements: earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and false ego. And we have a gross body, which is normally what we call the body, which is the Pancha Mahabhuta body, earth, water, fire, air, and ether. And this gross body is controlled by the subtle body. And the subtle body is the covering of the soul. So it's actually the subtle body, the mind, intelligence, and ego that are controlling the body under the direction of the soul's desire. Does that make sense? But as far as controlling, ultimately, we're dependent on Krishna. It's not that we are directly controlling the body. For example, if someone is paralyzed, they can't control the body. So we're dependent upon so many other factors. We're desiring, like I'm desiring to lift my hand right now, but how am I actually doing it? Super soul's giving me intelligence. That I guess there's some demigods involved in the whole process. And we're able to lift our hands.
When you mentioned the soul's desire, so is our only desire to love?
The soul's desire is ultimately, yes. The soul's desire is to engage in loving exchanges. And Prabhupada mentions this in the beginning of Krishna book, that we have a need, a desire to enjoy loving exchanges with unlimited loving exchanges, and those can best be expressed in relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But those soul's desires have been covered, or let's give the example that Prabhupada gives. You have a white light, and that white light is filtered by other different colors. Like if you put a green filter in front of the white light, it appears to be green, and if you put a red filter, it appears to be red. But the light is always white. Does that make sense? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the nice questions. Any challenging questions? People have a different opinion about where the soul came from?
It's not working.
It's,
Oh, yes, it is.
it's Vaishnavi in disguise.
Thank you very much for the class. My question is, you mentioned about how we just need to understand that we are a servant of Krishna, and yet...
Prabhupada said that.
You're repeating what Prabhupada said. So we have many lifetimes of conditioning, so many layers. So even though us as aspiring devotees, we understand in theory the principle, but every day, even daily, we are faced with the challenges and choices of choosing Krishna or choosing our lower natures and Maya.
Yeah.
So can you give some action steps of how we can choose Krishna and be patient with that gradual process?
Okay, I can give you a quick process or a slow process. Which do you want?
The quick one.
Okay, so what does it mean to choose Krishna? Choosing Krishna means to act always according to Krishna's desire, right? Anyabi lashata shunyam jnana karma navritam anukuyena krishnanushilanam bhakti rutamam, right? You know that verse from Nectar of Devotion? That's a nutshell verse in the Nectar of Devotion. For those who don't know it, I'll give a rough translation. Anyabi lashata shunyam, one has to be free. Shunya means like zero, nothing, zilch, whatever way you want to express it. And he said we have to be free of any desire for gross or subtle sense gratification or the desire for liberation. And so that's pretty hard, because you can't do a negative. If I say you shouldn't have any desires, what do you do about it? Isn't it? It's kind of hard. No more desires. Okay. Don't be attached to the body. Don't be attached to eating prasadam, which comes next. Don't be attached. No, can't say that. That's spiritual. So don't be attached to anything related to this world. Okay. How do you do it? You can't. You can't do a don't. So Rupa Goswami gives us the positive way to do it. Anukulyena krishnanushilanam bhakti rutamam. He says the way to do it, and I'm going to really tell you the quick way in a second, because this is all difficult stuff. You have to do what Krishna wants, but not only do what Krishna wants, just don't do it in your mind, and also you have to do it with a sense of what? Devotion. 3 qualities. Activity, be active, do it what Krishna wants, don't meditate on your service, tomorrow I'm going to do deity service or something like that. And do it with a desire to please Krishna. So the most important part is the desire to please Krishna. As Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, Patram Pusham Pulam Toyam Yome Bhakta Prayachati, one should offer me a leaf of fruit or a little water with love and devotion. Bhaktimam Abhyanati, another verse. One can only know Krishna by devotion. So how do you get that devotion? The question is, how can you do everything with devotion? Pretty hard, isn't it? No, it's very easy. And the way you do it, my realization, of course, this is a realization given to us by the acharyas too, is that it's very hard to think of what would Krishna want 24 hours a day, right? Therefore, Krishna has sent his devotees to this world, and specifically we have Srila Prabhupada and our spiritual, whatever spiritual master you're initiated by. And one can relate in that way. My personal experience is that we have to integrate in our consciousness the mood of the spiritual master, of the mood of Srila Prabhupada for everyone in the Krishna consciousness movement. So when I decide things, or I try, I'm not saying I'm doing it perfectly, that would be rather presumptuous. I think, what would Prabhupada want me to do? And I make my decisions based on that. So I bring Prabhupada into my life 24/7. Because it's very hard for me to understand directly what Krishna would want me to do in each circumstance. Because I read the Bhagavad Gita and I just come up with the answer, you should get on a chariot and start killing people. Right? Of course, I read the Chaitanya Charitamrita, I get a more down-to-earth answer. Preach Krishna consciousness. And then I understand Prabhupada and develop a relation, which each and every one of you can do, regardless of who you were initiated by. Then I understand more precisely what to do and what not to do, and I can connect my actions with Srila Prabhupada. And you see, Srila Prabhupada did that with his Guru Maharaj. Why did Prabhupada come to the Western world? You could say out of his compassion, which is true, but because of the order of his Guru Maharaj, which is the active, according to Prabhupada, is the active principle in spiritual life. So if you think like that, then every act can become an act of devotion. And not only an act of devotion, you will experience 24/7 something called the bhakti ras. Because that's really what you're hankering for, what the soul, that was touched on before. What the soul is hankering for is that relationship, that ras. Ras means relationship, or taste of relationship, sorry. That relationship with Krishna. And then life becomes pleasant whatever you're doing, wherever you are, when you're thinking like that. That's an easy process to enact. So, anyway, that's my answer. That's how one can just overcome all this illusory energy, and you're not actually here. You think you're in the material world. The material world exists. But you think you're in the material world, but you're not in the material world. The soul does not come in contact with matter. Just like Krishna at the time of the creation, Krishna doesn't come in contact with matter. He glances saikshata at the matter, and that Shambhu, Lord Shiva, comes in contact with the illusory energy. So, any other questions? We have to end, or yes?
Hare Krishna. For myself, I'm not so worried about the origin of the jiva because I'm down here and that's
right.
up there. But obviously that conversation has come up a few times with devotees. And the one sort of argument, I guess, that I've heard is that, well, if Krishna is all attractive, then why would we ever want to enjoy without him?
That's a good question. Why would we want to enjoy without Krishna if Krishna is all attractive? Because we want to, like Prabhupada said, sometimes, okay, let's take the position, let's say, well, I don't want to use an example of a lady. Let's use a man example, okay. Okay, that's good, not to use ladies. So let's say you see someone who's really strong, right? Some other man is really strong and big muscles and everything like that. What are you thinking? I want to be like that too. So, yeah, the person is very attractive. Or, all right, let's bring some ladies into this. So if a lady sees another lady who's very attractive, then she's thinking, I should copy some of those things that she's doing so I will be attractive. So, but the real question that comes into my mind that people have is, if there's no envy in the spiritual world, how can one become envious of Krishna in the spiritual world if envy doesn't exist? I mean, that's really a substantial doubt right there. So I'm playing the devil's advocate with myself. So the answer is, there is no envy in the spiritual world. It's just that one becomes curious and wants to emulate Krishna. It's not exactly envy. Just like a mother. The other example Prabhupada gives is that there's a mother cooking. And her daughter sees her cooking. The daughter is not envious of the mother, but she wants to have her own stove and cook too. I experienced this when I was young, because I wasn't a daughter. That's always this, body was always the same gender. I have to clarify that. So, but I had a friend who was a girl, not a girlfriend. I mean, we were only 3 years old, 4 years old or something. So it was innocent, platonic, as they say. So my friend had a play stove because her mother gave it to her, made of metal, and she used to cook clay cupcakes, which were not so tasty. She even gave me one. I did not offer it to Krishna. So, and she wanted to emulate her mother. It wasn't envy. She's not envious of her mother. But the living entity wants to emulate. He or she sees Krishna. And I'm not saying that we had a specific, let's say, relationship that was fully developed in the spiritual world, but there was at least knowledge. And we're responsible, according to Srila Prabhupada, for being here. And actually, we're not here. We're responsible for being here, and we're not here. Anyway, that's another subject matter. But Prabhupada is very clear about this. And actually, another objection people have to the point that I just made was a statement that Prabhupada makes in the Bhagavatam about the fall of Jaya and Vijay. So I'm just giving the objections to my particular points. Prabhupada said there, he says, actually no one falls from Vaikuntha. So that's the main statement people bring up to try to oppose the points that I've been making and that many of the devotees have been making. But if we look at that particular statement by Srila Prabhupada, that's in the context of a curse, living entities falling because of a curse, not falling because of a desire to emulate. So everything in the Bhagavatam, this is called hermeneutics, where you look at different statements that Prabhupada made or different statements that are there in the Shastra, and you have to understand them contextually. You understand contextually to understand what is being said there. But the overwhelming quotes from Srila Prabhupada and the Shastras and Bhaktivinoda Thakur and the Acharyas. I mean, I gave a seminar on the Jaiva Dharma, actually online. Overwhelming is that the soul was with Krishna. The soul made a conscious decision to come to this world. Okay, I think it's time to end, right? Thank you very much. All glories to His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
His Holiness Bir Krishna Maharaj ki
Oh, Gauranga.